Recently, an answer has emerged, one which not only explains what the handbags are and why they appear across cultures, but which changes everything we thought we knew about human history.
A god in Iraq holds it. A carving in Turkey, 11,000 years older, shows it too. A stone serpent in Mexico swallows a man gripping the exact same object. 3 civilizations, 3 continents, thousands of years, and an ocean between them with no contact anyone can explain.
What are these handbags? And why are they depicted again and again in cultures separated by centuries and thousands of miles?
Same rigid handle, same squared shape, same grip. And here is the part almost nobody knows. The people who carved these images already told us what it was. They wrote it down. The answer has been sitting in plain sight, in their own words, for thousands of years. The palace at Nimrud. Walk into the ruins of Kalhu, a city on the Tigris that modern maps call Nimrud, in what is now northern Iraq. Nearly 3,000 years ago, this was the heart of the Neo-Assyrian Empire. At its center stood the palace of King Ashurnasirpal II, who ruled from roughly 883 to 859 BCE. He built to overwhelm. The throne room walls were lined with panels of pale gypsum, carved in low relief and once painted in colors long faded. Every ambassador and tribute bearer who entered had to walk past them. Carved figures loom on every side. Some are the king himself, hunting lions or receiving prisoners. But repeated again and again down the length of the hall are beings that are not quite human. Broad-shouldered, dressed in fringed robes, with great feathered wings rising from their backs. Some wear the horned cap of divinity. Others have the heads of birds of prey. These are the Apkallu. In Mesopotamian tradition, they were primordial sages, half divine and immensely wise, said to have brought civilization to humankind before the flood. On these walls, they guard the king. They stand at every doorway like a wall of holiness, warding off evil, purifying the space around the fragile human at the empire's center. In the left hand of one of these winged sages is the object, a vessel with a squared body and a stiff-arched handle, held low, gripped the way you'd hold something you carried every day. The proportions are tidy, deliberate. A modern eye slides straight into recognition. It looks like something off a shop shelf. Now, look at the right hand. Almost nobody does. Raised near the chest is a small object shaped like a pine cone. And it isn't just being held, it's being extended, aimed toward a carved structure of interlaced branches scholars call the sacred tree. 2 hands, 2 objects, 1 gesture. That pairing is the whole key to this mystery. Hold on to it, because we're coming back to it. A wall of guardians. The throne room at Nimrud wasn't a single carving. It was a procession, panel after panel, the winged figures repeating like a heartbeat down the hall. Walk into that room in the 9th century BCE, and you wouldn't see a museum. You'd see a machine built out of stone and belief. Every visitor had to pass the gauntlet of guardians before reaching the king. The message was simple. This space is protected by beings older than your ancestors. Behave accordingly. Ashurnasirpal II ruled for roughly a quarter century. In that time, he waged brutal methodical war, and he built. He moved his capital to Nimrud and raised a palace so vast that, by his own account, its opening was marked with a feast that fed tens of thousands of guests over 10 days. The winged sages were part of that machine. They weren't decoration. They had a job every hour, whether anyone stood in the room or not. They weren't scattered at random either. They clustered at doorways, at thresholds, at the exact points where the Mesopotamians believed evil could slip through. They flanked the throne. They lined the passage every visitor had to walk. Their positioning was a spell written in stone, a permanent act of protection. And the object in the left hand, paired with the cone in the right, was the tool that protection ran on. The Assyrians didn't carve things by accident. They carved what they believed kept them alive. And that consistency matters. The squared body, the arching handle, the exact proportions, repeated across decades of carving by different artists on different slabs, never drifting. Someone enforced that. Someone cared that it be right. When people care that much about getting a shape right, for that long, the shape means something. Older than farming. Now travel roughly 500 miles northwest into the hills of southeastern Turkey to a site that has rewritten large parts of what we thought we knew about the human past. Göbekli Tepe. its oldest layers, date to around 9,600 BCE, 11 to 12,000 years before the present. This place was raised by hunter-gatherers with no cities, no writing, no metal, no wheel, and quite possibly no farming yet. They hauled multi-ton limestone pillars upright, arranged them into rings, and carved them with animals so vivid they seem ready to move. On one pillar, catalogued as Pillar 43 and known as the Vulture Stone, the carvings crowd together. Vultures with outstretched wings, a scorpion with its tail curled, snakes, birds, shapes scholars still argue over. Near the top, in a neat row, sit three small figures, squared shapes, each topped with a curved line arching over the body. Three handled vessels, carved roughly 7,000 years before Ashurnasirpal was born, sit with that number. 7,000 years is longer than the gap between the Assyrian palaces and us right now. When those pillars were raised, there was no Sumerian civilization yet as we know it. No pyramids, no empire, no scribe, no road down which any Mesopotamian idea could travel backward through time to reach these hunters. And yet, three-handled shapes sit above a parade of vultures and scorpions, staring out of the deep past. There are only two ways to answer that. The shape was invented twice, independently, by people who never met. Or it carried knowledge that somehow crossed that gap in a way we haven't traced yet. That narrow, uncomfortable space between the two options is exactly where the wilder theories take root. Before we go further, if carvings like this get under your skin the way they get under mine, subscribe now, because this channel exists for exactly this kind of mystery. An ocean away. The shape wasn't finished traveling. The next place it turns up isn't in the Near East at all. It's on the other side of the planet, in the lowlands of what is now Tabasco, Mexico, at a site called La Venta. This was a center of the Olmec, the culture often called the mother civilization of Mesoamerica, the people who came before the Maya and the Aztec. La Venta flourished between roughly 1200 and 400 BCE, overlapping in part with the Assyrian palaces on the far side of the world. Among the stones the Olmec carved is one that stops people cold, Monument 19, a seated human figure coiled around by an enormous serpent whose open mouth arches over his head like a doorway. One hand raised, the other resting at his side, and in that resting hand, gripped by a rigid handle curving over a squared body, he holds it. The same silhouette the winged sage carries at Nimrud. The same silhouette carved in a row of three at Göbekli Tepe. La Venta sits roughly 7,500 miles from Nimrud. Between them, oceans, mountain ranges, deserts, thousands of years of societies developing in the total isolation from each other, as far as mainstream scholarship can tell. No known boat carried Mesopotamian sculpture to the Gulf of Mexico. No tablet in any archive mentions the far side of the Atlantic. And yet, the object in the Olmec figure's hand and the object in the Apkallu's hand are, to almost any eye, the same thing. The case for something more. Line up Turkey, Iraq, and Mexico, and the pattern stops feeling like a curiosity. People have pointed to more echoes. Maori oral tradition preserves the story of Tauhaki, a hero who ascends into the heavens and returns carrying three baskets of sacred knowledge, three vessels echoing the three shapes at Göbekli Tepe. Egyptian hieroglyphs include a sign shaped like a squared enclosure with a domed handle, read as denoting the dwelling place of a god. New Kingdom tomb paintings show deities holding small bags whose contents are never explained. A Turkish pillar from before farming, an Assyrian palace wall, an Olmec serpent monument, a Polynesian myth of baskets from the sky, an Egyptian symbol for the house of the divine. Across all of them, a handled container tied again and again to gods, to knowledge, to the boundary between the human world and something above it. The strongest version of the theory doesn't need aliens. It goes like this. Human cultures build differently, dress differently, bury their dead differently, and draw their gods with different faces. When two unconnected peoples land on the exact same specific motif and attach the exact same specific meaning to it, that convergence demands an explanation. Something must connect them. A single lost civilization that seeded its and symbols across the globe before vanishing, or visitors from somewhere else, remembered by witnesses who carved what they saw as best they could. It's a serious argument, but a serious theory has to survive the question it would rather avoid. If one global civilization taught every culture the same sacred symbol, why is the handbag almost the only thing they share? Where's the common alphabet? The shared unit of measurement? The matching calendar? The loan words bleeding from one language into another? The trail real contact always leaves? When peoples actually meet, they don't trade one symbol. They trade crops, diseases, gods, and words by the dozen. A worldwide teaching civilization that left behind exactly one handled box and nothing else isn't a civilization. It's a shape. The hand nobody was watching. To understand why, stop staring at the bag and look at the other hand. In relief after relief at Nimrud, the Apkallu isn't just carrying a bucket. He's reaching toward the sacred tree, or the king, with a small cone-shaped object pinched in his fingers, raised and angled like someone about to flick liquid through the air. That object has a name. Assyrian ritual texts call it a mulalu, a purifier, a sprinkler. Pair it with the bucket and the whole scene changes. This isn't a god holding a container of forbidden power. This is a ritual we can reconstruct. The bucket, called a bandudu in the texts, held a consecrating liquid, most likely water, possibly oil, or a fragrant mixture. The mulalu was dipped into it and shaken toward whatever was being blessed, scattering droplets, the way a priest today might sprinkle holy water. Bucket in one hand, sprinkler in the other. Not a lost technology. A purification kit, frozen in stone at the instant of use. The Assyrians told us what it was. They wrote it down. The bandudu appears in their texts as an ordinary word for an ordinary bucket, the kind a worker might use to haul water or mud. The mulalu appears beside it. The gesture, the sacred tree, the guardians, all documented, all consistent, repeated across sites with the reliability of a liturgy, because that's exactly what it was. Residue pulled from actual bronze buckets found in palace ruins shows traces of water and plant matter. The signature of purification, not the chemistry of some lost science. The answer was carved in the second hand the whole time. Why the shape keeps coming back. So why does the same silhouette turn up at Göbekli Tepe and across an ocean? If the Assyrians simply meant a bucket, picture the task. You need to carry liquid without spilling it, without soaking your hands, without setting it down every few steps. There are only so many shapes that solve that. A vessel to hold the volume, a flat base so it stands upright, an arch over the top so a hand can grip and lift without touching the contents. Square body, curved handle. A human hand arrives at that shape almost the instant it decides to carry something. Different peoples, thousands of years and miles apart, kept reinventing it for the same ordinary reason they reinvented the pot, the needle, and the wheel. Because the problem was the same. Look closer, and the far-flung matches stop lining up as neatly. The Turkish pillar's shapes sit among vultures and scorpions in a scene we still can't fully read. The Olmec object belongs to a world of feathered gods and rain cults that owes nothing to the Tigris. The Maori baskets and the Egyptian sign each grow from their own soil, their own stories. Line up the silhouettes and they agree. Read the context around each one, and the agreement dissolves into separate, local, self-contained meanings that happen to land on the same easy form. But Göbekli Tepe keeps its power. Pillar 43 was carved around 11,600 years ago by people who hadn't yet invented writing, farming, cities, or kings. There's no ritual text to consult. No scribe left a word for what those three shapes meant to the hunters who raised that stone. Convergent design tells us they could have carved a handled vessel on their own. It doesn't tell us what they thought it was, or why they placed it above a procession of dangerous animals, or whether it meant anything close to what a bucket meant to a man in Nimrud 7,000 years later. On that pillar, the shape is real, and its meaning is genuinely unknown. An honest account has to leave it there. Where it lands. The handbag of the gods was never opened, because there was never a single handbag to open. The Assyrian object has a name, a partner, a purpose, and a documented ritual, a holy water bucket and a sacred sprinkler. That mystery is solved about as thoroughly as the past ever lets us solve anything. The scattered echoes in other cultures are mostly the fingerprint of a shape so useful our species keeps rediscovering it on its own. And underneath it all sits one genuinely open door on a hillside in Turkey older than history itself, refusing to explain itself. Maybe humanity has forgotten more than it has learned. Or maybe we keep mistaking the ordinary shapes of our own hands for messages from somewhere else. Of all these carvings, the Assyrian sages, the Turkish pillar, the Olmec serpent monument, the Maori baskets, the Egyptian sign, which one do you think actually connects to another? And which do you think we've been reading into for no reason at all? Tell me exactly which pair you'd bet on, and why. And if you want more mysteries where the real answer turns out stranger than the myth, subscribe, because the next object we open has been sitting in plain sight even longer than this one.